Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's sixth session. It's that time of the week when I get to park the day job and hang out with someone tearing up trees in the growth space. Essentially, I'm hoping to get smarter through association. You are, after all, the company you keep. Today, I'm thrilled to be having a conversation with someone who is disrupting the traditional approaches to sales and marketing in the SaaS space. We're hanging out with someone who believes that at the heart of every successful deal lies a genuine, authentic connection. He's someone that's been transforming the very concept of partnerships and introducing growth strategies that are very much on the tip of every marketer's tongue. He comes armed with an intrinsic belief that buyers' trust is paramount, and to win it, we can and should leverage existing relationships and trust within the ecosystem. Our guest has a track record of astounding achievements, from building enablement programs that have boosted partner retention by 70% to orchestrating from scratch a program that matched the revenue generated by direct sales with just a third of the manpower. He's a growth practitioner that stands as a testament to what can be achieved with a mix of genuine partnership strategies and sheer determination. He's on a mission to revolutionize how we conceptualize nearbound sales and marketing, aiming to replace cold outreach with warm introductions. Under his wing, the companies he's worked with didn't just gain revenue, they gained long-term, valuable relationships, often developing their own ecosystems. And to top all of this, he's also penning down his insights and experiences in a book that focuses on rewiring your mindset through a blend of psychological, sociological, and philosophical lenses, just to fill all his spare time. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the head of Nearbound partnerships at Reveal, the strategist behind the Nearbound approach, and a champion of authentic relationship building in the business world, Will Taylor. Will, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Probably the best introduction I've ever had. So I'm going to clip that. And if I ever need a job, I'm going to just send them that clip. So
honestly, I say this every week. I'm just waiting for somebody to ask me to be their traveling hype man. It's the job I'm looking for if anybody's got it going. So Will, thanks for joining us. First one, nice, easy one to kick off with. How's Q1 been for you?
Q1 has been all right. I feel like we're experiencing the pains that a lot of other companies are experiencing, and our fiscal year ends January 31st. So we had a really good end to the year, really good Q4, and not enough pipeline for Q1. So it's the age-old challenge that a lot of sales teams face. But in like comparison to a lot of other companies that are in the market today, we can't really complain. We're doing our best, and I would say, all things considered, doing good.
And for those not in the partner space, what is Reveal and who do you sell to?
Reveal is an account mapping software that allows you to take your list of prospective clients and overlap it with your partner's list of customers. You immediately get insight into who should we be focusing on in this partnership and how can we put rubber to the road, which is the biggest challenge for a lot of partner teams. They all have good ideas, but they never put rubber to the road and take action. And this is exactly the tool for that. We sell to partner managers and partner teams and anyone who is trying to expand their reach in the ecosystem with tech partners, referral partners, consultants, agencies, and the like, and anyone who's doing co-marketing with partners as well. Interestingly enough, we also talk to a lot of revenue professionals because they're starting to take notice of the potential of partnerships and the growth levers that can happen when you are having successful partnerships. So we have a lot of CROs and VPs of sales in the room as well.
And what's your role at Reveal?
I lead partnerships with some of our more traditional tech partnerships, but I also have a knack for involving myself in unique projects like working with influencers and how we can attribute the posts that they make on LinkedIn to business one for our business. And so it is everywhere from like content creation to doing these unique projects and the more traditional work. And my role recently changed where I'm also managing some of our partners' accounts to help them use the tool because that makes them a better partner for us. So it just makes sense.
So Nearbound, partnerships, ecosystem-led growth, what is it and why is it revolutionizing GTM and why is it exploding now? Because it's not new necessarily, like partnerships, particularly in the tech and SaaS space, that's like literally how kind of Six and Flow has built business over the last 9 years with our relationship with HubSpot. Why is it exploding now? Why is it getting so much attention?
The reason is because of a lot of different things, everywhere from like macroeconomic perspectives to like culture as well. the things that we can start thinking about is like the buying force is now the millennial, and the millennial likes to, scroll through TikTok, look on Instagram, and they really like their influencers. And they were part of, that growth in that world, the Kim Kardashians of the world now selling products. And that's happening in the B2B space because those buyers are those types of people. They grew up with social media. So they engage with information in a different way. And they also, there's been a traditional narrative of don't trust the corporation. They're just there to make money. And, the car salesman slapping the top of the car and, they're slimy kind of thing. And so the perception of business and trust in these businesses has definitely shifted. And the newer buying generation and even the older buying generation has shifted in how they interact with businesses. It's much more people focused. So how does partnerships play a role in that? Well, it is literally getting something like a warm introduction from your partner to the prospective client that the partner already works with. And why not trust the person that you're already paying a lot of money to give you additional value instead of that other company just reaching out to you cold and you don't know who they are. There's no reason that you should be talking to them. So from the buying perspective, the culture is shifting, but then also in a world where we were, less remote pre-COVID, we didn't have the need to, connect with people virtually via email, and our trust was much more in person, if that makes sense. Like we were going to many more in-person events, and we were, doing these business lunches, and everyone was in office. And so this idea of trust was very easily facilitated already in person. And so how do you facilitate that level of human interaction virtually? I mean, you can use things like video, which can definitely help out. But we are keeping our trust credits a lot closer to ourselves. When there's economic pressure to perform and everyone's struggling, I don't know if there's any Canadians listening, but if you are Canadian or you've heard about the housing market here, like it's crazy. So everyone who is putting or having this stress put on them, there's this pressure to keep your trust credits a lot closer to you because our attention credits are being absolutely exhausted with the advent of TikTok and really good tactics that these technologies have to capture our attention. So who are we trusting if we can spend all of our attention anywhere for 24 hours a day? Well, luckily buyers are putting that trust in specific individuals. It's typically the ones they already work with. So that's from like macroeconomics and cultural all the way through down to like the individual reaction or interaction. But also one thing that I love talking about is like, there's just more and more companies than ever. It's easier to start a business than you could ever fathom. Like I just learned that AI can now code things pretty well. We heard about it last year. People laughed at it, but now people are actually scared for their jobs. So if I want to code a software, I can, put a prompt in AI, maybe over a weekend, I have a new business. And so what that means is you now have 10 more competitors that are reaching out to the same buyer, and they're all using the same traditional tactics. So instead of the hundreds of emails that people got before, they're getting thousands upon tens of thousands. And it's all the same message because it's, all AI generated. So it's immediately overwhelming. And so if you want to break through that noise, businesses are learning that, well, we can have a strategic relationship that delivers this additional value to the buyers that we're trying to reach through the existing relationships. And that's where this idea of Nearbound comes in, where we call it surrounding your buyers with value through the existing relationships that they already have. So we call it Nearbound Surround, and it's the third leg of the stool. You still have to do outbound, you still have to do inbound. Those things are still important. Nearbound is the third leg to, help you keep your balance as a business. And it is going through these existing networks of trust and being strategic about it and tactical.
So partnerships is just me passing you leads, right?
As many businesses may think, but those ones quickly fail. And, that was actually a traditional way to partner where, the Microsofts of the world, they didn't have a storefront, but they had all these distributors like Best Buy and, Walmart, whatever, that was selling their products for them. And so that was the traditional way. And it did work for a certain amount of time, but again, as it's easier to build your own business, that means there's even more consultants making more requests to these organizations, but also more tech companies that they can partner with. And so, your Microsoft product is not as shiny because there's 100 others that you could be selling as well. So it gives more power back to, agencies like yourself to say, well, if you want me to, sell your product, we have to work together more strategically. There has to be a bigger incentive for my business. And that's where the strategic alignment comes in. So I love that you said that, because honestly, a lot of boards think that way, where it's like, yeah, we just set up a referral and affiliate program and we'll make some money. But it does not work that way whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. A slightly tongue-in-cheek comment. I love the concept of trust credits, though. I think that's a great way to look at it. So when our successful tech relationships have always been based around like that co-selling motion, and the theory being at some point one or other side, and hopefully both, becomes a trusted advisor and can then help promote in the other side into that like final sale. And I think that concept of trust credits, almost like a piggy bank of how much this person trusts you and how far you can push that, I think is a great way to look at it, because if you push it too far, you promote too many things, you're spending all of that credit, and it becomes very clear that you are just there to flog them services or tech and things like that. So I think it's a great way to look at it. So to give it a bit of color, how much has the partnership world grown in the past 2 years?
So I like to look at just overall investment in the space, both from businesses buying technology and also investors investing in new technologies. One really good stat, it won't be specific or exact, but 2 years ago, there was maybe 100 different partner tech companies. Now there's, 200, 250, maybe pushing 300. And that kind of growth is not just happenstance. People aren't just going, oh, I want to build a partner technology company because I love that space. Maybe that's the case, but there's a business incentive to go there because people are investing money, or businesses are investing money there, and investors are putting money there as well. And I like to think of it as akin to the MarTech boom that Scott Brinker talks about, where,
Yep.
there was first 100 companies, then 250, then, 500, and it just kept going and going exponentially.
What are we up to now? It's about 15,000 or something stupid, isn't it?
15,000. Yeah, it's absolutely bonkers. And so that's, going back to my point of there's so many companies today competing for the same, buyer persona. That's exactly a really good example. And so partnerships is going through that similar evolution, where there's this growing need where businesses are paying more attention to this because it's having this forcing function for growth to be pointing towards partnerships. So they need technology to service that. So that's one indicator. Another indicator is the number of job postings. Last year, at some point throughout the year, there were more postings for partner managers than there were account executives. Now, that stat in and of itself is not perfect, because maybe account executives are more widely hired, and so there's less postings because they're hired faster. But even still, that's pretty astounding, because that's never happened before. There's never been so many postings for this type of role, because more and more companies are starting to think about this and therefore hire for that position to then figure it out. That's another indicator, is just people hiring for that kind of role. This one's more of a personal one, but I used to have primarily sellers following me on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn is not super massive or anything like that. But there's been a change where it's more CEOs and founders that are following me now. And the reason for that is because they want to learn what they should know about for building partnerships if they're going to hire someone, or if they're doing it themselves. And that's another, anecdotal shift as well. But I would say the main thing is like, Reveal is a company that got a very big Series A funding, and that was about 2 years ago or so. And so again, there's more companies being created, more money being pushed here, because if I'm a, let's say, VC firm, and I'm looking at my portfolio of companies, and I'm seeing that the ones that are successful are the ones that have this stronger, ecosystem or like Nearbound related play that they're implementing, I'm going to take note to that, because I see across, hundreds of companies, and I'm doing so much research. So not only are they then saying, oh, well, why don't we invest in that? But also that's simply what they're talking about. And there's some data around like Bessemer Ventures and Anderson Horowitz that talk about how some of the top performing companies are ones that have partner programs. So it's definitely been increasing. And the reason for that is because, again, a mix of things. And there's been a rise of technology, a rise of businesses focusing on this, and at earlier and earlier stages. So some people are saying that, the 10th hire or so should be a partner person, because then you're getting closer to product market fit. You better plant those seeds sooner.
Yeah, I think most of the companies that we have worked alongside, it is the partner person has definitely not been the 10th hire. So it is an afterthought and then a scramble to create. But to be fair, a lot of those businesses, so like HubSpot is the prime example where that, like, it's originally Pete Caputa was the kind of the architect or grandfather of the HubSpot program, built that in because he was a salesperson who thought there was an easier way to be bringing in target, and then it kind of spiraled from there. And there's a lot of like learning on the job. But I think you're right. Like, I think it should be in a go-to-market strategy now, particularly in the tech and SaaS space. You have to be thinking about the two plays I would focus on personally is partnerships and also the whole education and kind of learning and enablement side. So if you can turn that, again, both HubSpot, both great examples. You've got the Academy, which is great whether you're a HubSpot customer or not. That obviously had marketing impact, enablement impact, blah, 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 blah. And then the partnership side. So I think that would be where I would be playing. So you are Mr. Nearbound. What does effective Nearbound take? What do the teams look like internally? How do you build and enable those partner relationships?
So the thing that we talk about with Nearbound in terms of from a tactical perspective is you have to segment it into different plays. We call them the 3 I's of Nearbound, where you're gathering either introductions, intel, or influence on an account. The reason for this is because traditional partnerships just look at introductions. But if anyone's been in a partner program and you've tried to talk to a CSM, they generally are like, no, I don't want to make an introduction because I'm protecting that relationship. And so you have to expand how you're going to interact with these partners, because it's not just that one-to-one, person-to-person introduction. It can be, but you need to think larger than that. So what that means is you need to be ready to communicate with your partner team and your partner's team that there is going to be this rules of engagement, and we're going to ask for specific information and specific plays together. So the way that you do that, and we write about this in Nearbound as well, where you have to write things for people. You have to write an email for a person. And it's so powerful because if someone is hesitant to make an intro, but you write them an email, then they don't have to do any thinking. And, they're going to audit it as needed, but they're going to send that email. I've seen this firsthand. I do it day in and day out, where I'll talk to a CSM. We do a review of accounts, and I tell them, I'm going to help make this easy for you, because if the end client doesn't receive value or see value in the message, then they're not going to convert. I need to start with value from working with that CSM. So that's everywhere from like writing the emails themselves. But then I think one thing that a lot of teams don't focus enough on is the strategic alignment internally, where if our company has strategic goals and our partner's company has strategic goals, and we say, well, here's where we want to be, both in our companies. Can we work together on that? If yes, great. Align at the leadership level, and then go down from there, where you're going to do some enablement. Maybe it's a lunch and learn session, but try not to do too many of those, because people are busy and they don't really care that much. But you'll start to find that there are hand raisers. And so what I always recommend to people is, once you've done the strategic alignment and you've got leadership bought in to say, yes, we want to take part in this partnership, which not all leaders will, even if you're just talking to a partner manager on the other side and you sign an agreement, that doesn't mean that you're aligned. You have to directly ask them, what do you care about? What are you held responsible for? Oh, it's, net new revenue. Great. I'm going to help you with that. And here's exactly how. That is going to drive, this alignment. It's not going to be perfect, but then once you get down to the individual level, you're going to find some hand raisers. And I always recommend that people work with champions internally. So find a champion CSM, find a champion AE, make an example out of them. And once you do that, then you can bring that story to the rest of the organization and your partner to say, this is what happens when we partner together. It means, higher renewal rates or easier deals. And we actually had a really good example of that during my time at Vidyard, where we had a seller who was the top seller, and their claim to fame was working with partners, and we got them, on the podium and told them to tell their story to the rest of the sellers, because sellers only listen to sellers. They sometimes listen to marketers, not really that often. And it's the same with partner teams. Like, sellers don't get partnerships. They don't understand this idea of, I can get an introduction and whatnot. In theory, sure, but in practice, they know sending emails, asking direct questions, so on and so forth. So getting an example that you can say, this is what happens when you do it, like your life is easier because you work with partners, that's extremely powerful. And that will then spread within the organization. So what I just talked about is everywhere from like tactical things that you can do and say, write the emails for them, tell them you're going to help them hit their goals, get strategically aligned so that there's some level of business incentive on both sides, where a sales manager knows that we are partnered with this company at the very least, and then make an example of individuals, and don't try and boil the ocean, because again, if you try and work with 10 sellers to enable them to do something new, like even internal sales enablement teams have a struggle with that. And the perception from what I've come across is that sales enablement is like, a failed seller, which I don't agree with, but I mean, that's what you're dealing with. So if you're a partner person, like sellers will say that to every person who's not a seller or used to be a seller. They're just like, it's a failed seller. You become a marketer or a CSM, whatever. And, they may be right, they may be wrong. I'm not going to make that call, but like, that's the persona you're dealing with. And so what you need to understand is, like, people truly don't care, and you have to make them care by making it easy and making them understand that it's aligned with their goals, and dangle the carrot as well, because that's going to incentivize people.
Who's doing Nearbound well?
Other than HubSpot,
other than Reveal and HubSpot,
and of course, other than Reveal, HubSpot's a good example. They're a Reveal customer, but you work with them, so you know just how well they're doing it. Box is another great example of running Nearbound plays. A public company, also a Reveal customer. They are all about Nearbound. We work with the individual who runs their overall partnerships program. His name's Dan. Dan is amazing, and he does Nearbound in their organization to influence the other teams, where he's buying a bunch of our book and giving it to them, and saying, like, you got to read this, and hyping it up. Like, he is our true hype man. We even have stories with him and the success that he's seeing with his team as well, which if anyone's curious, I'm happy to send it over. Sixth Sense is another good example. If you've ever been to any of their events, like, there's partners there, they're making introductions, they're mingling. I went to one of their events, I think it was last year. It was so good. Like, partners present, and like everyone just having a good time. I definitely recommend in general working with them, because one, you'll have fun events, but two, you'll be able to see it in action.
We're working closely with Joe Wright on the EMEA team. She's amazing.
Yes, exactly. And maybe there was some influence there. She used to work with Reveal, but nonetheless, that is the tactical execution in action. And another one is Qualtrics. They're an absolute powerhouse team. What they're doing is very impressive from a partnerships perspective. So anyone that can take a look at what they're doing from a partner perspective and any stories that they're releasing, I highly recommend it, because their team is very impressive, just like all the others that I've mentioned.
So how did you go from aspiring therapist to leading a revolution in SaaS GTM?
So big praise. I'm definitely not the only one, doing this movement. I have a lot of support, from a lot of people, which, is part of the Nearbound methodology, is, get other people on board and do it all together. But honestly, the growth from like being interested in psychology and wanting to be a therapist and then falling into the business world is probably like a pretty typical, I've got a Bachelor of Arts in psychology. What do I do next? I don't want a master's. I don't want a PhD. That's too much school and money. So I'm going to get into sales. So that's ultimately how I got into this path. And I think it does add like a certain level of, awareness on what I feel, what other people feel, how to communicate better, enabling people and the like. because that is what I've found it has been kind of like my superpower in developing trust with people, where I don't just talk about business. I'll talk, more than just the weather. I'll talk about, the how their week is going, how they're feeling, like what's been exciting. It's not terribly complex stuff, but developing genuine connection with people is not only a requirement, I would say, in business in general to do, a lot of good business, but also especially in partnerships, because if they don't trust you, if they think you're just in it for yourself, then they're not going to take action because they're in it for their self. Everybody is technically in it for themselves, but if you take the first step and say, hey, I want to give you this thing, or I want to help you. I noticed you're doing this. I want to help you with that. Why would people say no to help? And it's kind of mind blowing to me, where when I started doing outreach to new partners in one of my roles, I would always reach out to them with some compelling reason, because I was in sales. And so, I knew at least how to write a decent email. And I know that people don't care about whatever it is I'm emailing them about, but they will care if it's something that gives them a gain. If I'm giving them a small gift, if I want to include them in something, it's hard for them to say no. And so I got this concept in my mind where I started thinking, if I interact with people or reach out to people with this message of value that makes it hard for them to say no to, then they're going to say yes, and I'm going to get a lot of yeses, and they're going to get value. I'm probably going to get value from the interaction, and it's going to start the relationship off at the right foot. So there's a little bit of psychology in there, and also testing during my time doing sales. But with that, I started to understand the interaction within partnerships, where I was like, oh, this is much nicer to do business in the partnerships fashion with other people, because there's a win-win-win happening where the client wins, the partner wins, and we win. So that felt a lot better, because I was selling procurement software to government agencies across mostly central US. And I was doing direct sales, cold calling. I was a BDR and then was an account executive, and it was okay. Like, I was developing relationships with people, but it seemed very one-to-one. So it didn't feel as scalable, but then also the interaction didn't seem as value oriented, because in the back of both of our minds, we're both like, okay, this guy's a seller. He's selling me something. There's nothing wrong with sales, but I just think there can be an easier way that can reach scale better, that's more sustainable, translates more value over time. And that's where partnerships started to come in. And the idea of Nearbound, and this is kind of like bringing it somewhat full circle and maybe tying the bow on this point, but Nearbound is this idea of like creating movements within ecosystems that create a chain of value throughout that ecosystem, where everybody is happy to engage and they're all winning in some fashion. And if we expand that out past business, that's super important, because if I want to create a movement of helping more men with men's mental health or something like that, or inspiring more people to care about their physical health and the like, then if I'm just standing on the side of the road, shouting at people, that might get some followers and people that say, yeah, I'm aligned with this, I'm going to be inspired. But instead, if I develop relationships with the 10 influencers that have millions of followers each, then I can spread that message much more easily, and we're all working together at that point. So why would I try and do it alone when I can do it with other people? Because no great business is ever built alone. No movement is done by one person. Maybe there's figureheads, but at the end of the day, you need relationships and other people involved. And on a more personal note, like, the data suggests that the more personal relationships you have, the longer you're going to live. So I want to live a long time. And so if I can develop relationships while also doing business, while also understanding how to facilitate this interaction of expanding a network in a value-oriented fashion, then I'm going to live long. I'm probably going to make money. People are going to be happy to work with me, and I'm probably going to make more friends. And that sounds pretty dang awesome.
So you've previously talked about being an introvert, which doesn't often fit with that stereotypical image people have of a salesperson. Looking back at your first days in tech sales, what were the major challenges you faced as an introvert breaking into the field?
Yeah, so I had a fear of talking to people I didn't know. And I worked in retail selling cell phones and internet services for a bit, and that like kind of broke me out of my shell. But I never cold called someone because I relied on my physical presence. I'm not. I'm like I work out and stuff, and so people generally are okay engaging with me, and so I relied a lot on like the physical, smiling at people, all that kind of stuff. So getting onto the phone, I was like, oh, I'm losing all of that. Like it's truly my voice, which at the time was a bit more monotone, no facial expressions and all of this. And so I'm like, this is horrifying. And I got this job because I was like, oh, all my friends are working in tech, and I live in a city where there's a good amount of tech companies here. And so I was like, I want to do that too. They're making money, their offices are cool. Let me also do this. And then I joined a company as a BDR. I was the only one, and I was breaking into a new industry, and we had a new VP of sales. So there was like no process, no documentation, not a strong value prop either. So the way I overcame it was honestly just doing the work, getting the reps in. There was in part this fire underneath me where I'm like, this is paying the bills, so I truly have to do it. But the like testament to me getting over it is doing the reps. And so I'd be sat in a call room, just like stress sweating for, my first 2 to 3 weeks, because they were like, get on the phones. That's the best way to learn. I was like, okay, cool. But that was the thing that taught me, how to talk to strangers. And I think being an introvert brings a certain level of ability to listen pretty well if you're engaged and curious and actually care, versus the more traditional extrovert is very talkative. And from what I've been seeing in terms of the data and sales, those who listen more and ask good questions are going to close generally more enterprise sales. If you want to be more transactional, being an extrovert might work. Not saying it's a catch-all, but in general, that's what the data is suggesting. So I do think it can be turned into a superpower. But if anyone's like, a shy introvert, then they just need to put in the reps and they'll get comfortable with whatever challenge they're facing.
I find so I'm an introvert, and I'm not shy. Like I hate cold calling. Like it makes the very thought makes my kind of skin crawl a little bit. But I think like for me, it's about energy. So like it takes me a lot of energy to engage with a lot of people over time. I hate going to a networking event until I kind of get into that. But I actually think some of the best sellers I know or have known are introverts, and they are much more consultative in the way that they sell. They like kind of have a deeper level of understanding, and I think they come across as less threatening, particularly in larger sales cycles and things like that as well. So I think like you're right, if you can turn it into a superpower. You're a strong advocate for authentic connections over transactions. Beautiful segue there. What does that mean? How can it impact a partnership or deal, and why should growth leaders care?
So one of the things that the partner community talks a lot about is give, get, get, get. And the sentiment there is you should be giving more than you get. Now, the beauty of it is you can always spin a give into also being a get. So for example, if I'm putting together a blog post and my blog performs really well, we get a lot of traffic, and I say, hey, Rich, I want to, showcase you as the expert on XYZ topic. Can I feature you? Here's like a general quote, something you said before on LinkedIn or something like that. Can I feature that in this blog? Not a lot of work for you. It's technically a give because I'm featuring you, but I'm also getting this additional value, and that's going to be beneficial for the overall blog post because it's not just a company talking about the thing that they're trying to sell, but it's including other experts. And if you do that, with multiple experts, then it's probably going to be a really good blog post. And so this idea of starting with a give helps to open the door to a more authentic connection, because it's showing that like you understand their world to a certain degree, meaning what they want, which is maybe exposure. And that's a really easy one because a lot of people want more exposure in general. And so, you're showing them that them, which is a Sam McKenna quote. She loves in sales to talk about, show people that them, show them that what they want, show them, what their expertise is. And, it's a bit of a fluff, like, give them a bit of incentive, like, hey, you're the expert. Of course, that's going to make you feel good. And so if it was instead, and I'll draw the line in the sand here. So authentic connections, a lot more focused on, I know you, I want to help you out. I care to a certain degree, even if I'm gaining something, like that's awesome. The line in the sand is if we contrast that to, hey, Rich, can you promote my blog post because your audience would be, relevant to that. That's completely just me getting something. Maybe you say, well, yeah, why would I do that? You should pay me. And then immediately it's transactional. And that's honestly how a lot of interactions with like influencers go, where they say, they're approached by a company and they say, hey, I want you to promote this. And then they'll come back and say, well, how much are you going to pay me for that? And immediately that's not a relationship. Like that's a transaction. And that can work for some people, but in my mind, that's not strategic. That's not long-term. That's just, dollar signs going in and out of a person's bank account. And it doesn't drive authentic engagement if we think of that interaction in the community or the people that they serve as well, because they're not going to care, there's no alignment, and they're not going to make it valuable. So why does this matter for growth leaders? Well, if you're just doing the transactional thing, sure, you might, get the numbers that you're looking for, but does that create this long-term value that is ultimately needed to actually make a transaction with clients? I'm going to say no, because if you reach 100,000 people because the influencer's got a big following, great. So you hit your numbers of maybe we got so many views, but how many of them actually converted? How many of them sign up for the newsletter or the webinar or the product? If you are doing this one-off transaction, that's not going to work. And I don't know if he's loved or hated in this community, but Chris Walker is a good example of this, where he's like, if you do one video and you look at the metrics of that and you say, well, video doesn't work because the one video didn't work, well, then like you should not be a marketer, because you should be thinking long-term. And it's not just about the initial numbers, it's about the perception that's built. And that's honestly harder to track. But if you're seeing business growth over time and you're confident that this person is, a trusted advisor, in this case of the influencer, then they're going to build trust with you in the market because you're going to be strategically aligned with the narrative. And that's going to convert into business maybe down the line. Again, harder to attribute, but why would you want to just chill out money as much as you can to create these transactions with people and not really be strategic about it, instead of building a relationship with a person who is going to be motivated? If you actually care about what they care about and care about their outcomes, they will become motivated to speak good about you in the room when you're not there, versus the transaction where they truly don't care because there's 10 other companies that they could do a transaction with, but there's not 10 other companies that they could have a relationship with, because not all of those 10 are actually trying to care. So that's a big difference, because a lot of business happens outside of, the funnel. It happens in the ecosystem of who's talking about what on forums, at events, just by happenstance on, let's say, a webinar or, a talk like this. That's where trust is built and value is delivered. So there's a lot of incentive. And I hope what I just talked about convinces people, because I tried to make it as clear as possible that it does actually create an impact.
So I love this stat that I'm going to kind of talk through in a minute, but you've managed to generate revenue comparable to a sales team with just a third of the headcount through a partnership motion. I think that's one of the things, like, that is powerful. And I don't think a lot of revenue leaders often kind of translate to that. And when we're looking at this kind of that failing growth at all costs model, where it was more bums on seats, more activity, and you start to look at stats like that, it's impressive. But so talk me through what that is, how that happened, and kind of how you managed to deliver such a solid return.
Yeah. So if we think about the interaction with partners, one partner manager can manage in general about 50 partners. Let's say it falls prey to the 80-20 rule, where 20% of those partners are actually producing revenue. So, 10 partners are actually producing revenue. If I'm one person and I'm connected to 10 other entire businesses and or individuals that are producing revenue, my ROI, even just from a headcount perspective, it's basically like a 10 for 1 in that calculation. And so if I'm like, the average pay, as I understand it, for a partner manager is, with a decent amount of experience, it's about like 150,000 USD OTE. And you compare that to sellers, this average seller, I don't know exactly what they're paid, but consider their base, I don't know, 60K and their OTE is 120K, give or take. If I have 10 sellers, immediately that calculation is, one individual for headcount, a little bit more expensive than the seller, and then 10 other organizations that are doing marketing and sales for us, that we're doing it with them. Or I could spend that amount on sellers. Now, the trade-off is partnerships take longer to stand up. You can't just immediately get 10 businesses to start, working with you and promoting your product and servicing it and all.
Just passing leads though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's and unfortunately, a lot of like executives do think that way, like we talked about already at the start. And so that's what maybe turns people off is, it takes time. And what I always recommend is it depends on the business, but it takes about 6 to 18 months to actually generate revenue from a partner program. That doesn't.
And what are some of the key indicators in that 18 months? So like a paid media campaign, right? So or an SEO campaign, you would start to see growth. You start to look for certain things. Yes, we're not bringing any return, but we're starting to see more traffic. We're starting to see a couple of conversions come through, blah, 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 blah. In that 18 months to stand up a partnership, what would be some of the key indicators that you could go back to the C-suite and say, yes, we're not returning any revenue yet, but look, we are on the right path?
One of the things that I always recommend partner teams to do is run co-marketing often. If you're doing any marketing program, include your partners in that. And what I would recommend for any person who's standing up a program and they take that approach, take a look at all of the business metrics when you include partners. Marketing is the most top of funnel. So if you're building pipeline with partners, then that just makes sense to do. Take a look at metrics of these programs without partners. What does a webinar look like when there's no partner involved? What does it look like when they are involved? If it's a 50% increase in registration and a higher attendance rate, that is compelling. Maybe those eventually turn into actual leads for sales as well. So start looking at the more top of funnel metrics. That example you could span across, we did a blog post with a partner, we went to an event with a partner, so on and so forth. So those co-marketing efforts are going to give you that data to then say, well, there is a positive impact based on, the initial 6 to 18 months that we've been working with partners. There has been an impact. The 6 to 18 months, it does depend on what I always say is like, how long is your sales cycle and how expensive is your product? If it's a cheaper product, then you can probably stand up a program in 6 months because it's a bit more transactional and the sales cycle is probably a lot shorter. If it's, 18 months, it's probably because you have an expensive tool or the sales cycles are long or it's a complex tool. So yeah, the metrics that I would be looking at as a partner professional in the early stages of building a program would be, as we're doing these co-marketing events, what's happening in terms of compared to pre-partner or no partner events. And if there are sales that are closing, if a partner comes to us, they have a lead ready, what is the data there? What is the win rate? What is the sales cycle time? What is the, looking specifically at the conversion stages between each stage in the sales cycle? I would hazard a guess that you'd see data to suggest that, which would then assume faster movement between each stage. And if we think of the interaction of if my partner can introduce me to the decision maker, instead of me prospecting to the champion who then gets me in front of the decision maker, which maybe takes 2 months of outreach and calls and whatnot, I could immediately get a warm intro to that decision maker, which could get me on a call that week. So 2 months versus 1 week. But the math will start to math if you are tagging, partnered events, marketing events versus not. And when a deal is closed with a partner, what happened at that time? Like, is it a larger deal? Was it faster? So on and so forth. So early stages, if there are deals won, take a look at those kinds of metrics, and then definitely do co-marketing early because that will show the initial value. Just like, any other business being stood up would probably look at marketing metrics. And like you said, it happens over time. It's not just immediate. And the same thing with partnerships.
You mentioned OTE for partner managers. What is the normal target that you would expect? Like, as it not the value of that target, but like, what is the main metric that a partner manager should be managed on?
Generally, there are two metrics. It's sourced and influenced pipeline and closed won revenue. So what that means is sourced is it came directly from the partner. They submitted a deal or they introed me directly. Influenced is maybe we did an event together and my partner was involved. They didn't source the opportunity, meaning like they didn't get the person to go there, but my partner was on that webinar and maybe they work with them in some fashion as a customer. And so there's this additional value that they're probably, again, when we're not in the room talking about, especially if we are coordinating the event appropriately and doing appropriate follow-ups with our partners. But yeah, in short, it's sourced and influenced revenue on closed won revenue and pipeline, and that's going to focus on this revenue generation overall. What I wish more partner managers or partner teams were held accountable for is like LTV and understanding like renewal rates and whatnot. I think we will start to see more of a shift in that area, but there are massive implications of, even for example, I think the stat is for every integration that a customer has with your tool, there's a 13% increase that they're going to renew with you. So like that's massive for any business that's trying to be sustainable. So yeah, in short, it's generally like a 70-30 split as well in that amount that I mentioned, sometimes 80-20 for that OTE. And those are the typical metrics that they're held accountable for.
So you were the first partner enablement hire at Vidyard. What was your approach to increasing partner retention by 70%? And how tough was it having Rob as your boss?
I'll start with that last part of the question. It was not tough at all. And I'm not just saying that because we meet up every once in a while. Rob was a great manager. And like him and I still stay in touch for good reason, because I learned so much. And he also, I think the main thing was he gave me the space to become the expert that I wanted to become, which was at the time, I actually didn't really know about partnerships. I just cared about enablement. I wanted to do sales enablement because, my psychology background and wanting to deal with people and motivating them. So he gave me the space to build, effectively whatever I wanted, and gave me the space to, shine essentially in the things that I wanted to shine in, that I felt were my superpowers. So, yeah, that's what was great. I don't honestly have any bad things to say. I wish I did. I wish I had something like.
I wish you did too, because just for context for everybody listening, so Rob heads up Canada for Six and Flow now, and used to head up partnerships at Vidyard. But yeah, back to the first part of the question. So the first enablement hire, how did you then kind of like, that's a increasing partner retention by 70% is a hefty stat.
Yeah. So the challenge that a lot of partner teams get into is they go for volume. They typically will, promote a BDR into a partner manager role, which what they know is sourcing, net new conversations. So that's what they know. That's what they're good at. And a lot of teams will then fall into the trap of, great, we have, 100 partners, but none of them are actually taking action. Why is that? Well, our partner managers are trying to manage with them, but that's where I think you also fall into the trap where it's like, they show up to the meeting and they go, where are my leads? Because again, they're used to generating leads in their BDR role and doing outreach. And so that's the trap that Vidyard fell into, which is very, very typical. So it's no like blame on them. And this was also like technically before all the buzz in partnerships. So what I did is I was brought in to make sure that those partners stay on as partners, but also that they're increasing their activity in the program as well. So instead of, showing up to a call and saying, hey, where's the leads? What I was meant to do was make sure that they felt motivated to be in this partner program and thus renew in the partner program. And there was a contractual value for at the time to stay in the program. And so there was actual like dollars associated with it. Wasn't a large amount, but nonetheless, none of them were taking action, or a few of them were. And so when I was brought in, instead of focusing on just generating leads, I was asking, what does your business care about? Like, what are your challenges right now? Why aren't you taking action? And like, give me the real take. Like, I'm here to help. I'm not here to have any like ego. I just want to help you be successful. So the focus on truly understanding how the business is successful made a pivotal shift. And this pivotal shift then told us and the team to say, oh, we have to give them something more than just, hey, here's access to the platform, now go sell it. It was, hey, we need to give them a reason to make more money off of this, more than just a referral commission, because referral commissions are, a nice bonus, but that's not how a service business, primarily working with service businesses at this point, that's not how they make money. And so it was a tech company saying, hey, go make money on our software through the lens of how a tech company makes money, but it wasn't through the lens of how a service company makes money, which is primarily through services, delivering value, maybe upselling to a new service, so on and so forth. And so that's where I started saying, okay, we need to develop some level of certification program. We need to help them build a service. We need to actually know how it fits into their service stack. So I was doing everything as tactical as looking at a quote that the agency partners would give to their prospects or to their clients, look at the actual service stack that they offer, and identify, oh, here's an opportunity for our technology. Maybe it was, a website redesign. Great, that's an opportunity to think about video. Maybe they have existing videos. How can you implement it? That's an opportunity to, sell the software. On the sales side, same thing. And we would give them this package where it is validated with them that, hey, this is what your business cares about. This is how you service clients today. This is how you make money. This is how you as an individual actually are compensated. This aligns with all of that. So now take that and go implement it, because this is going to get you more value out of the partnership. And we've agreed that this is not just internally but you and I as a partner have agreed that this will genuinely generate you revenue in some fashion. And it's not all perfect. You'll still get the 80-20 rule of partnerships, which in general is, 20% of your partners produce 80% of the revenue. But, at that time, I think we were like a 5-95 split, where it was much more of a minority of the partners. And so, yeah, the I guess claim to fame is having a 180 in terms of how we approach the conversation. It's, what do you care about? How do you make money? Why is this valuable to you? How does this help your clients, versus this is my business, I want you to sell my stuff. It was less me, and more, what's your world like and how can I help you? Which then, of course, like I said, businesses are why wouldn't I say yes to this if it's literally business help on, I can grow my business through this new service. And of course it required some pitching. I had to put on my sales cap, and it wasn't just Will being the nice guy. I did have to challenge people on stuff, but at the end of the day, it was focused on what they care about, and that's what motivated them.
Looking forward, where do you see the future of go-to-market strategies evolving over the next few years?
Other than, of course, including more partnerships, I think we're going to see more value-based marketing and selling. And so what used to be, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, was blast SEO, spend as much on ads as possible, hire as many BDRs, and just build the pipeline from there. That was not value oriented. Google is picking up on this with SEO, where they're making those changes. And SEO's kind of already been bought up by, Forbes and the other larger companies. So it's harder to play in that space. Ads, more expensive, same thing, more competition. And so when I interact with a company, again, when we go back to the idea of the millennial buyer, I'm expecting value, because if I can choose between 10 vendors to give my attention credits to, and I give it to 3, and I'm going to give one of them my trust credits, then I'm going to give my attention to the ones that are actually valuable, and the ones that help me the most are going to get my trust credits. And so a value oriented approach, I think, is going to be the continued evolution. And we're seeing that within sales, where more sellers are talking about signal-based selling. Signal-based selling, akin to ABM, where you're getting, some data on why they may be a better fit than just our general ICP, because they've, attended X event, gone to our website, page Y, and, whatever it is. Signal-based selling is becoming more popular. And it honestly, I think the partnerships and Nearbound methodology is, I'm going to say a bit ahead of the game, because when you think of signal-led sales, the next understandable step is, well, partner signals are a signal, and tools like Reveal can give you that kind of signal where you can understand who is in orbit of this buyer already. So I'm obviously biased, so like me saying it's partnerships and Nearbound is the next phase of GTM. I'm biased, but I'm betting my career on this, and that's why I've really tripled down on creating content and stuff in this space, because it just feels like it's the way it's going to go, because people do business with people that they trust, and they don't want some like faceless corporation that just spams them with ads. And so the complete opposite of that is those introductions, people knowing other people talking good about your business when you're not in the room. And that requires some level of strategic alignment with partners.
So my final question, what's your biggest career fuck up to date? The one you learned the most from?
Definitely when I was in sales, and it wasn't near the time that I stopped doing sales because I was let go because of COVID. But this, I was working a deal. It seemed promising. Hope was not my strategy, so I was still like really gunning for it and putting in the work. But then I learned that they bought a competitor. The one contact I was dealing with, who was the champion, he was telling me, "Yep, we're probably going to buy eventually." So I was multi-threading. They're like, "Oh, we already use this competitor." But instead of going to my champion and having, a person-to-person conversation, and I, again, worked in government. And so there was like a certain level of taxpayer dollars being used for these tools. I emailed like the rest of the team that I talked to in that organization. I said, "Why are you using taxpayer dollars for like a lesser tool? Like I was assuming or alluding to them wasting taxpayer dollars and basically not doing their jobs." So of course I got a phone call and I took an earful, and my one coworker, he was like, "Just fall on the sword. Don't try and like defend yourself in any way. Like, you did wrong. So just take it and take it as a learning lesson." So what I learned from that is always be direct with the people that you're dealing with. Don't go around them. And don't, of course, say that people are not doing their job or wasting people's money. And always fall on the sword as well. There's no good time to be defensive if you've done the wrong thing. Don't try to even explain yourself. Just take it and get a beer after.
I like it. Will, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've got another like 20 odd questions I could have asked you throughout, but that was super insightful. Anybody who wants to connect with you, how do you want them to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I create content there. So if you want tactical insights, then you can drop me a follow. It's all free. And I don't do too much related to Reveal in terms of like content. I will when it's valuable, because it is a great tool. Of course, sign up for the tool. It's free. And if you want to email me, wtaylor@reveal.co. And if you want to partner, let me know. If you have other questions, I'm happy to help. I have a podcast, so if you want to check that out, then you can as well. We share tactical insights, and it's all focused on making sure that you leave with action so that you can hit the ground running and be successful. So that's what I'm all about. I'm all about helping. So LinkedIn, email, you can find me there.
Well, I really enjoyed that, and I get to see you in person next week, which will be fun.
That's right.
Thanks very much for joining us. See you later, everybody.